Rolling video.
What BPM is this? What BPM is this podcast at?
So this is the part where I come up with an intro to the podcast, just kind of improvisationally. I actually think I could edit something together with us talking about the BPM of the podcast.
Perfect.
Yeah. Or I could do a meta joke where I play that whole thing and then play this too, where I break the fourth wall and just talk about my editing process and say, this is just an Aridonis podcast. Yeah, like that. Cool. All right. Intro. Intro done. I can always go to the fourth wall breaking meta for another joke.
Just to break the ice before we start, I loved your Michael Buble story when you walked in when you were in the hospital. And, it reminded me of a time where I was working at a music venue and I'm so not in the HP Harry Potter universe at all. Like, right. I'm so far removed from that. And Draco Malfoy was at the show that I was working at. Not the actual character, the actor, I should say.
Right, yeah.
Tom Felton, I think his name is.
Tom Felton, yeah.
And he was, like, talking with this big group of girls, and, like, I did not know it was him. Like, if you showed me a photo of him, I wouldn't even know. And like, but he did look like strikingly a lot like a kid I went to high school with, but I haven't seen in like 10 years. So I went up to him. I'm like, hey, like, I know you. And that started off like fine. Like, you know, he probably gets that all the time. And then I'm like, it's this, like, and gave like this first name and last name that was just so like, not even, and like, close. I don't know, like, I was confused, like, he was confused, the girls were confused, and like, I don't know. I think everybody walked away from that scenario, like, really just, like, what just happened? And then at the end of the night, like, somebody I was working with was like, yeah, like, Draco Malfoy is here. I'm like, oh. And they, like, pointed. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, that makes a lot of sense now.
That reminds me of a story. Hold on. First of all, sorry. What's your name? Who are you?
My name is Taylor Roberds. That's Roberds.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, now that we got that out of the way, that reminded me of a story. Now, since we're on celebrities, there was a friend of mine who works as a DJ at a strip club occasionally in Vancouver. And one time, Patrick Warburton came in, and everybody was all stoked, and you're like all super excited about it. And my friend had no idea who Patrick Warburton was, like, you know, because like when you're in a strip club, everybody's yelling, so it's like, you know, and he's obviously got a very like iconic voice.
Was he coming in to strip, or was he just...
I think he was just there to visit. Okay. I don't know.
I don't know the name, so he could be anything to me right now. Patrick an author, Warburton? A musician, like...
He was the voice of, like, Joe on Family Guy.
Oh, okay.
And the voice of... he played Putty on Seinfeld.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have known if that guy walked in.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. You might not recognize him right away, like, but when you hear him talk, you're like, oh, I recognize
right. Oh,
that
that's
guy.
A recognizable voice,
yeah. He's got one of those voices that you're just like, oh, I know this dude.
Yeah.
But, anyway, and then he was telling me about it later. And everybody was, like, talking about how Patrick Warburton was in the club, and he had no idea who it was. And he apparently had a conversation with him for, like, 15 minutes and had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, that's, like... Because I know he's, like, you know, and he likes the OG Family Guy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's Joe from Family Guy. And he's like...
You went home and watched Family Guy and was like, shit!
Oh, yeah. He's like, I would have had so many questions.
I'm trying to start a trend on your podcast now. So if you haven't had my experience, you could have the reverse, where you just go up to people who... aren't celebrities, and you're like, you're The Rock, right? Like, no, man, I'm just trying to work out.
Yeah, exactly.
Just trying to get my gains.
So you're here. You got you make some music and such. What music and such would you, or what words and such would you use to describe your music and such?
Yeah, I've been a solo artist since kind of like, let's say, peak of the pandemic. That's a tongue
I get
that.
I get that story a lot.
Yeah. Well, so the music I make, I mean, I'd say it's primarily instrumental focused with some singing and some words when necessary. I don't really like to sort of pinpoint it as like, I mean, it's definitely influenced by a lot of like post-rock or ambient artists, but cool. I don't really want to say like I make post-rock music, because then everyone's going to think like I hit play on his Bandcamp or Spotify, and I thought it was going to sound like Explosions in the Sky, but what's all this acoustic guitars and all this stuff? So, and same with ambient, like where's all the electronic? So, I'd say I like to draw influence from a lot of instrumental artists. I don't know. I think for me, like being a very like visual person, I'm somebody who can like listen to instrumental music and really like see visions in my head. It's kind of where I get a lot of like my song title inspiration from, and as well as like album art as well too. And I mean, it kind of all started through the pandemic. I mean, like I was playing in bands all up until the pandemic, and like obviously nobody could really jam together the bands that you were in. So I mean, I was in a band at the time, and we were, going back and forth trying to make stuff work through, the pandemic, which was tough. And so eventually it was like my bass player in that band, Kyle Thomas, who recorded a large amount of my solo stuff. He was well versed in the producing world and was kind of like, look, like you guys, we all get on Logic, and kind of send each other DIs back and forth. So that was kind of the start of it for me, was being like, oh, okay, like I can do some home recording and write this way and figure things out. So,
right.
And yeah, I mean, the lockdown went a lot longer than I think a lot of us expected. So, yeah, for me, I kind of just took a lot of that time to be like, what can I do on my own? And I don't know. It takes for me like I love making music with people, but it's nice to just finally have something that is my own, that I don't need a set drummer or a set bass player for, a set this, and it still allows for people to be able to collaborate with me, which I love doing. But it's not like you're anchored in until the end of this. Like it's under my name. I can choose to do this for as much as I want or as little as I want. And with each project, sort of, work with different people, the same people, reoccurring people. It's nice like that. So
yeah, no, I think that's a nice freeing thing once you kind of discover the freedom of being able to just kind of work with whoever you want. Because I mean, maybe some of that comes from like working with a band for a long time, and you're just kind of like all not sick of each other, but kind of just used to the idiosyncrasies that everybody puts out there, and the you just kind of like, you're not like, that's not really how I would have done that guitar part or whatever.
For sure, yeah. Like I mean, I can say for sure, like I'm friends with most of the people that I've been in bands with, and I can say like our relationships are for sure better outside of the band than within the band. Although that being said, like, I mean, you have so much fun touring and doing that kind of stuff. But I think with all things, like when you do it for so long, eventually you are going to butt heads. And so it's not to say that like these projects that I've been doing, like these EPs and singles I've been putting out, haven't had hardships. They have for sure, but there's a deadline in sight versus being anchored into something. When it's under my own name, it's like, I can stop this tomorrow, or this can continue till I'm 90 for all I know. So
yeah, that's awesome. And so do you, like, what's your process like? I've always wondered with instrumental stuff, because I'm kind of a lyrics first guy most of the time, and so a lot of my songwriting process comes from, here's an idea that I put into words, and then I try to make music that matches the words, and then and then it all kind of mushes together. But
that's so interesting.
So
I'm the opposite of that. So it's cool for me to hear somebody like they have the words in the music. I don't think I've ever done that, but it's
so how does an idea come to you, or do you just sit down and fish around for ideas? What's your process like?
Yeah, like, I mean, I think it's sort of changed throughout the process of me putting out this music. Like about when I started this about like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think I was still in that kind of band mindset of like, it has to sound exactly like how it's going to be performed live, and like hadn't really, dove into any like idea towards like production that goes into EP at all. So I mean, like the first song I wrote for this project was Yellow Flowers. It was just an acoustic piece that I wrote for a girlfriend of mine at the time. And then from that, I was like, kind of want to flesh out some more material for this and make an EP's worth. So my first EP had like, I was just planning on just doing acoustic guitars for it. And my friend Kyle, who produced it, he was like, I'm hearing this, and that. And I was almost a bit resistant to it at first. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, maybe just being in my headset of like, what has to be recorded has to be able to perform live, which is like
Yeah.
so not like that now.
Especially during the pandemic.
For sure, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, I was a bit resistant at first, but like hearing his ideas and sort of how things can be fleshed out and layers being added on. I mean, the thing is too, is like, that's not to say I can't, like, I'm still looking towards doing shows with, you know, just a lot of effects pedals and just guitar on its own, but it's nice to be able to have the option of, you know, having a full band there to create what's on the record.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, from that EP, fleshed out like a bunch more additional instrumentation. And then I think from that, I mean, going into my second EP, I had more of a mindset of like, okay, this is acoustic. These songs are acoustic songs, but I mean, I'd say my first EP writing process is more like, this is an acoustic guitar EP. Second EP was more, this is an EP with acoustic guitar on it,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, going into that process, I was already thinking like, okay, drums here,
Yeah.
like this second layer of guitar here. And moving forward from that point, it's sort of been that thing kind of like, I mean, I still think there is a lot of room for minimalism within that, but it doesn't have to be just that on its own.
Right.
And definitely am open to things being added. With words and music, that's usually my last thing. Like, and I'll even think of the melody before I come up with the lyrics. So with
Right.
me, it'll be like the guitar and any additional instrumentation that needs to be added, and then I'll think of like the melody and try and match the melody with how many syllables I'll need.
Yeah.
And just I think the lyrics thing for me, like I'm really particular on lyrics,
Right.
especially with like making the syllables work and not making it also sound forced, where it's like, okay, that just, who uses that word in
Yeah,
real life,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
like,
yeah. The thesaurus people. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, yeah, usually lyrics are the last thing, which, I mean, with my music, there isn't much, but even within that, I'm very particular on it. So I will sit on on lyrics that might be just 30 seconds of a song for days on end and just driving myself nuts until I go, okay, that's it. Let's go. Let's record this now. So
That's so cool. Yeah, no, that's such a departure from how I do things, and so it's cool to get a different take on it. Because for me, it's like it's like you sometimes don't even like pick up an instrument until I've got like the whole song and kind of melody and lyrics kind of figured out, which is like, I mean, I do it other ways sometimes depending on how it happens, but that's so interesting because it's like, for me, the thesis of the song is kind of anchored into the lyrics,
right.
And so you're coming at it from like almost feeling first, you know, and then putting the message afterwards, which is so cool.
Yeah. I would say, so this new EP, Weight of the World, a little bit different. Like, it's a lot of, I mean, mostly spoken word poetry. And so I did have words written prior that I had written about just the passing of a family member of mine. Sort of the EP revolves around just like grief, dealing with grief and death, both in like the positive and the darkness as well too. Kind of wanted the flip side of that. And so the first track of the EP, Orange Sun, I wrote from my perspective of just dealing with grief. And then my friend, Jordan Hughes, is a local musician, also plays in the band Saturdays from here. He actually wrote with that on me and actually spoke the words on the EP. And he came in with poetry that he had written for the last song on the EP, Gray Dress. And he sort of wrote it through the perspective of what the thought process would be of somebody after they've passed over, and sort of the emotions of dealing with this newfound place of like, what is this? What is going on? Like, am I still part of life? Am I in the afterlife now? What is everybody going to think of me? What is my name? How will I be seen? And so we kind of liked the idea of the, like, I had this, he had that, and they were two complete sort of opposite ideas that we kind of worked with. And it was cool to sit down with a close friend of mine and just blend poetry ideas together, take lines out and add until we both finally had something where we're like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was really the first time I kind of actually like had something separate written for anything that I've done before.
That's so cool. It's like just taking the storytelling elements of it and then finding out like, oh, like these stories kind of.
Yeah, it kind of worked really well in a sense. So
that's awesome. Yeah, finding a new color.
Yeah.
To paint with. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of like pre-pandemic bands and stuff like that, you how long would you say you've been doing bands and stuff? What's your sort of musical background?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like right out of high school. Started playing in just like little local punk bands and stuff like that. Just around like the Langley sort of scene. I mean, after moving to Vancouver, I went to school at Capilano University for Arts and Entertainment Management, and then through there, kind of like didn't really play in bands for a bit because I was just in university and kind of like just focused on that. And then after that, obviously, I was like, I still want to tour. I still want to play shows. And so I started a band with some close friends of mine called Portraits. We were like a local pop rock band. So we put out like a couple records, did like Western Canada tour. And we got back together like briefly through the pandemic, released a couple singles. And so that was kind of the period for me where I kind of got to do Logic, because that was with that band. We were working back and forth sort of just through like email almost, because we couldn't we reunited and didn't even really have a band practice, to be honest with you. So, or like one or two odd ones. But so that was, I never really experienced writing before like that. So
yeah, it's weird. I did the same thing with my band, Western Jaguar. As the pandemic sort of started to kick up, we were like sort of bouncing around with just like iPhone demos back and forth to each other, and it's like, it's not my favorite way to make things. It feels so, because it's so not immediate when you need feedback on something, or if you want to change something, or if you're not sure about an idea, you got to send it out, wait for everybody to like get home, get a chance to listen to it, and then get their sort of gut reaction as they come back. But maybe that's not the reaction they want right away, because they need to sit with it for a little while. And it's like, and all that whole experience can be shrunk down into like 10 seconds when you have the idea and then show it to them before you record it or anything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it was interesting, but also like we did come together with a lot of songs pretty fast. Like, I mean, a lot of them weren't released, but it was just interesting to hear like, oh, that was like something I came up with in my room, like not having played it in a room at all. And then like now I'm hearing it with like drums, vocals, bass. But absolutely, I agree. The other end of that is like constant threads of emails of like, that needs to be changed, this needs to be changed, this needs to change, versus just hashing out in the room. Yeah,
having those like really kind of explosive, like happy accidents writing sections together where everybody's just like mushing things, and then you come away with something. I mean, obviously there's room to come up with like a really cool, meticulously thought out idea when you come at it with the right intention when you're working kind of remotely.
Yeah.
But
we were wanting it though. Like I mean by some point a few months in, we were just like, can't wait to get together and jam again and prep for shows and stuff like that. So I think it's just like, I don't know, you miss that already. But then especially when like you start working with an old band again, you're just like, God, I just want to get back in the room and do this. Yeah.
So what's your like experience been like with like the Vancouver sort of live music scene? What's your take on it? Coming from the sort of the scene that you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, like I've both like played and like worked as well in the local scene. So like seeing both sides, like it's extremely tight knit here for sure. It's kind of funny, like everybody knows everybody. But within that too, like I've just like, it's cool to see how tight knit it is. Like it's like a lot of like the bigger venues that I went to, like growing up and seeing like some of the bigger bands I've seen at some of the bigger, like, 1,000 person halls. Like you'll be like, you can go and see a band, say at like the Biltmore or something, and catch your friends play. And then they might be opening for some touring act at, the Vogue or like the Commodore a couple months later. And you're like, it's crazy. It's crazy to see like just how like, if you know the right people here and can get connected with the right promoters, just to see like people that I know and have like known forever just kind of like go on and play all these different styles of venues that we have in our city. So that being said, I would like to see more all ages venues within our city. I felt like there was more at one point, like 10 years ago or so, but now it seems like they're shrinking. But at the same time, I mean, COVID really put a hit on that as well too.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And there's a lot of, factors like, property being expensive and, trying to maintain expensive rents while also keeping shows cheap. It's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah. I will say, like, I like the DIY scene here a lot. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, RIP 333, but like, loved going to shows there when they were
Mm-hmm.
still open. It reminded me of going to like a lot of the shows that I went to in Langley in like the mid 2000s, where just sort of like everybody knew everybody,
Yeah.
and everybody was welcome, and just pack a room full of people and
Yeah.
have a good time. There's lots of good like little venues like that, like Black Lab, and I still haven't been to Redgate actually, but I've been meaning to go there for a show.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Redgate's awesome. They've got. I was really impressed when the first time I came in there. It was like the sound system was a lot better than most DIY shows because I'm a huge stickler for things sounding good, and part of the aesthetic of the DIY scene is this like really like blasting, just kind of loud party kind of sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm so I mean, I'm gonna sound elitist, but yeah, it's like I really just want it to sound good, and I want to be able to understand the music that's being thrown out to me. It's one thing when it's like it's meant to just be like a party, but when it's like somebody's going and showcasing their art for me, I want to be able to understand what's happening.
Yeah, when I was younger and went to shows, I didn't
Yeah.
really seem to like notice that. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even wear earplugs to shows
Yeah,
when I was
exactly.
younger. And like once you start wearing earplugs to shows and start noticing when it's almost like when it's bad, then you really start to notice it. You're like, oh, it's hard to unnotice once you notice and can go to enough shows to like compare the two, right? So
Yeah, no, definitely comes with experience. Your first couple of shows that you go to as a kid or even play, you're like,
that was awesome.
This was awesome, no
Yeah.
matter what,
Yeah.
And then nowadays, it's like there's some venues where if I got offered to play there, I would just say no because I know I know the experience of seeing shows there or whatever. But it's like, yeah, if you're not gonna really put if everybody involved with the show, like from the sound guy to whoever owns the venue that's in charge of setting up the sound system, if everybody involved isn't coming together to make like the best thing possible, then it's just like, I can't make up the entire difference by caring the most. It's like everybody's got to care, and sometimes I just like I'm in a room, I'm like clearly somebody doesn't care,
for sure. Yeah.
and that sucks.
Do you have any venues here that you like particularly like the sound at? Like,
Oh, I mean, there's tons of venues that sound great. I heard Imperial is actually closing down.
oh, really?
Yeah, I can't remember who I heard that from, but I think this year or something they're packing it in. It might have already happened. I'm not sure, but they for sure had some of the best sound in town.
Yeah.
But I've always loved Commodore. Vogue can be good. It's hit and miss with Vogue. Sometimes with touring acts, that you never know. But Queenie also is awesome. I saw Hosier at Queenie, and he was like just insanely good sounding. But
I still haven't been to the Queen E for a show, but I did a venue tour there in school, and there was like a dance, like the soundproofing between the walls is so thick that there's like a dance studio below, and they'll be teaching like ballerina lessons as there's like a metal show going on, and like you won't even be able to know.
Yeah, no.
Or maybe they do know downstairs, and
Maybe,
they've just
I'm
been like
sure.
dancing to black metal this whole time.
Time. Yeah, there's this whole literally underground form of dance.
Yeah. I was actually just speaking with the Imperial with a friend recently.
Oh, yeah?
Like I saw Los Campesinos there with a friend of mine a couple of years ago. And when the band finished, they just came like right off the stage, like right into the crowd. And we're like, that's so cool that they did that. Like, they're like down to earth people. And like, I saw another band there and they did the exact same thing. And like, I started to realize then that it was like, oh, they can't get to their bus in the back because well, the bus is in the back because there's usually like an overdose in the alley. So it's like, they'll just have to come like right off the front of the stage because I mean like it's right on that corner there. Right?
Yeah, Main and Hastings, but it's the venue itself. I've always been really impressed with the vibe and the sound. I've seen a bunch of really great shows there. The other one I really liked for sound, also kind of hit and miss, but back in the day was the Media Club.
Oh wow, yeah, man, I grew up there. Like I mean saw so many great shows there. Yeah. And like a little part of me, like I was walking past that like street a couple of years ago, and I just saw that like it was like a restaurant, and a little part of me was like crying inside. I'm like, so many memories, like met so many people here. And yeah, it's just like, it's hard for me not to look at that little space and think of all the shows that I went to there.
No, it was so awesome. I remember one time it was Boxing Day, and I went and saw this dude, Rainwolf, who was like, yeah, I don't know if he's still around or what, but he was just constantly touring at that point in time, like 2014 or something. And he was just like was just like one of those kick drum and guitar guys.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he was rad, and yeah, Media Club was like the perfect venue for that. You know,
Yeah.
everybody was having a great time, and I was just
I mean, now that they're closed down, I guess I can say this, but like when I was 18, 17, that's like the venue that like some of my friends and friends that played in bands that were a bit older than me would like sneak me into through the back. So those were like my first 19 plus shows, even before I was 19. And like, a lot of the times, like I'd be waiting by the door, just dressed as like some punk kid, as like Queen E was doing like their dress rehearsal, like set up, and people were in these like gowns and everything like that, just staring at me like, what the hell? Like same door entrance. And I'd just be like, hi there. Like,
hello.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's been it's weird how the landscape has changed. Like there's a bunch of cool venues that have popped up, but there's definitely room for more.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
I would love to see a little bit more investment from like local government or something to just try and, you know, preserve or encourage, you know, some cool venues to pop up. You know, like they do a lot of there's a lot of spending and stuff that goes on, you know, like putting on events and like, you know, Mural Fest and Catsalano and stuff like that. But I would love to see just some of that money just go to having a cool place to play that's like, you know, no, you don't really have to worry about whether or not it makes money.
Yeah.
You know?
I say this to people too, like if you really want to see a band and they're not coming to Vancouver, just drive to Seattle. It is not that far. If you got a license, it's 2 hours. Like it's great. A friend of mine works at a venue in Bellingham called Wild Buffalo. It's literally like half an hour past the border, and I went and saw This Will Destroy You and Minus the Bear there a couple summers ago. And like, I think it might have been happening in Vancouver, but I couldn't go to the show. But I'm like, I asked them like, yo, can you throw me on the list for the show? And just drove over. I'm like, this is so cool. This is so close to the border. And I'm like, I'm in like a whole other demographic altogether. So.
Yeah. How's the, like how big was that venue? Like what's the,
felt like it was about probably around the size of like the Biltmore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe like 200, 250.
Yeah.
Really nice raised stage, and then above the stage as well, they kind of had like a little bit of balcony that you could come and watch from like behind the stage too. So it was cool to kind of have like that bird's eye view.
That's really cool.
As well too. But that's a great little venue in Bellingham.
Yeah. Well, that's sweet. You know, and it sucks that that this is a totally whack thing about like it's pretty prohibitively expensive to play as a Canadian in the U.S. and vice versa. You know, it would be so cool if we could open that up a little more and it was a little bit less heavily policed.
Yeah, it's pretty intense for that. I mean, I think the visa process has gotten easier.
Yeah.
I mean, I've not played in the States, but this is just what I've heard, that it's a lot easier now than it was. Because I remember before it was like this at least like 6-week waiting period where you're just like, what if these shows get canceled? But like, you just got to book and hope, I guess. Like,
yeah, there's some people that are like that I know would like if they're in a medium, you know, to bigger size band, it would take, you know, a lot, like sometimes like a year's worth of planning to get, you know, a tiny show at a venue the size of the Biltmore to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
lots of planning.
Yeah, and so it can be really frustrating.
But then you got like, I mean, I guess once you're over the board, if you can make it happen, there's way more cities in between.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like so much more compared to just the long drives in Canada.
Yeah, so. Canada is an empty expanse for most of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So in future, do you have any other sort of plans or collaborations or whatever that you want to, or shows coming up that you want to kind of promote?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm working right now on a bit of a full-length album, cool. Sort of separate from my solo artist stuff. I mean, it's still going to be primarily me, but more just like with a name to it, more vocal-driven sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Within that, like, I mean, would be open to have people join it as a project, but I mean, it'd be nice to also just have, in case those things don't work out, it's still like I started it, like, you know what I mean? The thing I'm working on right now is just like me starting things, and then it's like, even with the separate thing of my name, it's like even if I have 4 people join and a year later they're gone, or 6 people join and at that point they're all gone, it's like it started with me and can end with me at any point.
Right.
So
It's still your project.
Yeah, and I also did I acted in and did like a small amount of scoring for my friend Jordan Hughes, who's featured on my new EP. He's got a short horror film coming out this October called Clean Freak. Bucket list check that I've now died in a horror film, because I'm a huge horror fanatic. So I can die happy for a second time, because I was still happy on set doing that. So I can really die happy. It's
always great
versus
to die.
fake die happy.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, dude. So when is that movie out now, or
it's coming out this October. So he's just been pitching it to festivals and whatnot right now for the fall season, but that'll be out this October. Clean Freak.
Radical. And people can follow you where?
They can follow me, Taylor Roberds. That's TaylorRoberds. I just have to spell it because so many people think it's Roberts, which is that's the common thing, right? Like I did a first aid course once and filled my name out properly, and they sent me back my certificate with a correction of my last name. I'm like, that's great that you thought I spelt my last name wrong, but now I can't save somebody's life if somebody's dying in front of me. So Taylor Roberds with a D. They could find me at that on Spotify, Bandcamp, as well as Instagram. It's all just 2 words, I should say. First name, last name, conjoined together, social media style.
Yeah, of course. Of course. All right, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming and hanging out.
Thank you. No, pleasure talking with you, AJ.
Yeah, dude. It's been sick. So, follow Taylor Roberts. Check out the stuff. Close your eyes, probably, and see if you can see the same pictures he's seeing.
Maybe so.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one, y'all.